Thank you for having us today. It is good to be with you at Pomona. I mentioned earlier that I had a lot of memories when we lived in McEwen many years ago. We began using Dr. Bass as our dentist. I'm not the only one in here that has had dental work from him, I expect. And then, at some point, I started coming to Dixon to see Dr. Thetford for braces, who would come from Green Hills. I'm probably not the only one who's had wires put in my mouth by him. Because of that, I got to where I didn't like Dixon. Because anytime I would come, somebody would hurt me. But nevertheless, it is good to be with you. I love Riley Hendricks. I had forgotten that he was associated with Pomona. I knew that because Carter would see Riley when he was here with you all a couple of years or so ago. I had Riley in Life of Christ class that I taught his first semester. And I debated whether or not to tell you this, but I am going to, and you can choose to do with it what you want to. But Riley came as a very green freshman from Kentucky, I think. Is that right? And Brittany, of course, I know very well. Larry and Carol Waymeyer, her parents are good friends of ours. But Riley came as a green freshman. And so early in the semester, I asked Riley to lead the opening prayer in Life of Christ class. Riley, who sat on the second row right here, stands up and in this want-to-be-a-preacher voice starts screaming his prayer to God. And Riley is truly one of the most sincere people I've ever known. Just impressive because he is so true and so sincere. However, he had come to believe that when you speak, if you're going to be a preacher, you project your voice, and boy did he. Such that when he finished his prayer, the girl right behind him who didn't appreciate it just spoke up and said, "God's not deaf." And I truly did not know it until a couple of years afterwards, but I found out that made its way around campus such that a God's Not Deaf in honor of Riley Hendricks Facebook page became created. So ask him about that next week when he's here. Tell him I said hello. He's a good guy. I like Riley a lot. What I'm going to do today and tonight is to give you a small piece of what I do, or sometimes Tina and I do. We sometimes will split up the husbands and wives for a part of our abnormal marriage seminar. And I want to set the stage for this. Several years ago when we were in Mobile, I went to University of South Alabama and got a degree in counseling, not knowing exactly how I would use it. Well, as the time passed and as we grew, we began working a few years ago with couples whose marriages were in trouble. And we did that not at all a career in any way, have never charged for and never wanted to charge, wanted to help. And so that began growing and growing to the point that when we moved to Columbia, in fact, while I was at Columbia Academy, we didn't do much because I was too busy. But then after the Columbia Academy period of time, we started letting it be known that we worked with couples and began working again with couples, and that ministry grew and grew to the point that the West 7th elders approached us about formalizing a family ministry at West 7th. And we have done that. I say that partly to tell you about what we are doing at West 7th. I told the elders in our initial discussion that Tina and I wanted to work with couples and wanted to help. Tina teaches at Columbia Academy and is not employed in any way by West 7th, but we work together in this ministry. And we offer especially marriage counseling to couples who are in trouble. We do this at no charge. I told the elders I didn't want to put another burden on couples who are in trouble. Many times finances are a part of the difficulty, and I didn't want to make that worse. They agreed I also told them that it was very much and is our desire not to just help couples at West 7th. It is our desire to help marriages anywhere. And they agreed with that ministry and that mission. I say that to say it is not at all unusual for us to go somewhere, for me to speak on marriage, or for us to work with couples who a few days after will call and say we need help. Oftentimes it is the case that people don't want their friends and elders and preacher and family members to know that they're in trouble. Well, we are here to help if we can. And over the course of the lessons today and tonight, I hope that I'll show you that from our experience and from our dealing with literally hundreds of couples through the years, that we've learned something about marriage, and we believe that we can help. If you have a need, or if you have family or friends who are in trouble and have needs, you can simply call the church office and make an appointment. And it is completely confidential, and so I'll throw that out, not at all as we're looking for clients, but we're looking for people that need help that we can help. That's what we're doing. The seminars that we offer, I entitle The Abnormal Marriage. The reason for that is I'm convinced that it is a small percentage of marriages, even among church-going people, that truly have best friend, close, intimate marriages and relationships as God intended. I very much see all of the time that the natural process of marriage is for husbands and wives to grow into coexisting. And the degree of coexistence is far greater for some than others, and I'm not trying to stereotype at all. But it is the case that life takes our best friend relationship away from us because of all the screaming that takes place, life screaming and demanding from us. And so today and tonight we're going to talk about how to fight growing into coexistence and how to maintain a marriage as God would have us to maintain them. And I want to suggest as we begin that it is indeed the abnormal marriage, the exceptional marriage that we want, and to suggest that the abnormal marriage is the unique marriage. I'll ask, how many times have you seen that marriage, that relationship that you could spot a mile away because they're so sweet, they're so close? What couple, having been married more than 5 years, do you know that has this wow marriage that we're talking about, that we notice? And why do we take a second glance when we see a couple who's been married over 30 years that still hold hands? And what do we think? When marriage begins, everything is wonderful, and we think ours will be different. We can handle anything. We have a love that will never die. Nothing will ever come between us. And on this day, everything is just absolutely perfect. Oh, everything is special. Even if something happens in the ceremony, it doesn't matter, because we're going to have that abnormal or that wow marriage. Ours will be different. However, over time, changes take place. Right? Yeah, things happen. What happened? Well, we're going to talk about that. And if we grow old together, what will our front porch look like? Will it be this? Or will it be this? Now, do you know them? I saw somebody turned around and looked like, wait a minute, Grandpa. I'm sure this couple is a great couple. I'm sure that they love each other dearly. But you don't look at them and go, oh, look how sweet they are. They've got that special marriage. They grew into that abnormal marriage. If we wind up like this or this, we have to make it happen. And most don't. I'm convinced of that. Why? Well, here's what normally happens. Life sucks the relationship out of the marriage, and I'm going to fly because I've got a lot to do, so just stay with me. Husband and wife become so consumed in life that they slip into coexistence. And maintaining a marriage is just like maintaining an automobile. If we do nothing for upkeep, it's eventually going to die. And what causes this to happen? What takes our relationship from us? The newness of the relationship wears off. Jobs, children, financial difficulties, wanting to have more, and we change over time. Because we do change over time. If we've been married for any number of years, the thought of we're still exactly like we were the day we got married is almost humorous. Why? Life changes us. Spiritual stagnation takes place oftentimes in things that we don't expect. How many times do we have that call, or we have that doctor's report, or we find that piece of information out that we thought only happened to others? And all of this results in the relationship slipping away. And what happens when the relationship slips away? We start turning to hobbies for primary enjoyment. Especially wives rely on their relationship with their children to be their most meaningful relationships. Friendships sometimes with others become more meaningful than friendship with our spouse. You know how dangerous that is. And because of that, we become increasingly self-centered, looking for what he or she is not doing for us. Sometimes wishing he or she were more like thinking about a particular person or couple in mind. And so this process is this. We begin by floating on the cloud where we can live on love. Money doesn't really matter. Just give us a one-bedroom apartment and everything will be fine. We can live on love. And then life's distractions come. Bills, family differences, progressing up the career ladder, extended family pressures. Can't believe my mother-in-law wants or expects this. And then children come along. And on this day, everything's going to be perfect. It's just like that wedding ceremony day. On this day, that little bundle of joy is going to be nothing but happiness. But things change. Because with children come ball games, homework, sometimes learning disabilities. Those teenage years. And they're not always easy. And about that time, those children especially grow to the point that they are truly demanding so much of us, we wake up and find ourselves not nearly as close as we used to be. Coexistence, where we have a loss of mutual interest. We have our own jobs oftentimes. Our likes have grown to be very different, to the point that we'd rather talk with friends or coworkers than each other. Now, for many of us, especially if we're in those young adult to middle adult years, I'm nailing it right now. I know why. We went through it. We dealt with it. We went through some difficulties because of it. Why? Because I'm convinced everybody goes through this at some level. Some to a very serious level, and some to a level where they're able to turn it. Well, this is what we're going to talk about. And if we're not careful, we get to that fifth stage in which there's a great deal of frustration and resentment and a significant lack of fulfillment. Now, I never do this without somebody coming up to me afterwards and says, that's it. That's exactly where we are. And I've gone through so many situations with couples that basically I'm just reproducing what I see. And this is not only the path of those who are in trouble, it's the path that most of us, all of us, go through at some level or another. And if we're not careful, we wind up here. And I see an awful lot of us that wind up here. So, do you want a great marriage? We're here today to talk about it. My question is, how badly do you want it? Do you want it badly enough to work at it? Now, this is my good friend outside of my family, my best friend, Rich Brown. Rich taught at Freed Hardeman, now teaches at Harding. He and I spent last week together in Searcy doing a project for him that I wouldn't have done for anybody but him. Rich is a runner. In fact, I think this is either Boston or St. Jude. Now he runs 50 and 100-mile trail runs. In fact, he's got the Arkansas Traveler coming up in a few weeks, in which he will run 100 miles under 24 hours. Every one he's run has been under 24 hours. That's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. When we were both in Henderson together, and I'm probably his biggest running fan, I love the fact that he's so good at it. He's 53 or 54 now. But I always love hearing about his runs. When we were in Henderson, he would talk about running this marathon, and I would say, man, I wish I could do that. And for a while, he'd just kind of grin. And then he would eventually say, do you really? Do you really wish you could do that? How badly do you want to do that? And you know what he was doing? He was saying, if you want it bad enough, you can. Why was he saying that? He was testing how badly I wanted it. I put Rich on the screen today to make the point. It's one thing to say we want that abnormal marriage, but it's not just going to happen. It's not just going to happen. In order to have that wow marriage, we have to make it happen, and it takes work. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Do you want it badly enough to work at it, to change your priorities, your schedule, to tell people no, to pray together about it? In the same way that just wishing I were a marathon runner is not going to make it happen, wishing we had that special marriage is not just going to happen. So, in the remainder of time we have this morning, we're going to begin looking at 7 components of the abnormal marriage. We're going to look at 3 of them this morning. So, let's go. Number 1, it only makes sense to start with building marriage around God. Building marriage around God and doing it His way. I want to tell you, Satan will destroy every one of our marriages if we'll let him. That's his goal. It's his goal to put us in the courtroom. It's his goal to cause our kids to be ripped to shreds because mom and dad didn't make it. It's his goal to tear us apart. Why? If he's going to be in agony, I guess he wants us to be as well. And because of that, he transforms marriages from 2 people who are interested in one another and care about one another to 2 people whose paths occasionally cross, who only communicate when necessary. And he does this in a way that it slips up on us. We don't intend going into marriage to find ourselves one day feeling not so close, feeling resentment, feeling frustration. Why does it happen? Because Satan's licking his chops. He gets us to that coexistence point because when we get there, we are sitting ducks for all kinds of issues. C.S. Lewis said it this way: when I have learned to love God better than my earthly dearest, I shall love my earthly dearest better than I do now. Insofar as I learn to love my earthly dearest at the expense of God and instead of God, I shall be moving towards the state in which things are put first. When first things are put first and second things are not suppressed but are increased. C.S. Lewis, who had a very interesting marriage, didn't marry until very late in life, married a foreign housekeeper that worked for him only in a legal way in order to keep her in the United States. Both of them agreeing to go through the legal process simply to keep her in the States as his housekeeper. But in the process, learned to love her deeply, and she loved him. His statement says what I believe, and that is, If we want our marriages to be good, we've got to start with our relationship with God, because when our relationship with God is not what it ought to be, everything in life just seems to fall apart. Well, as we look at all 7 of these this morning and tonight, I'll begin with Bible verses and look at these. And I'm going to pull some of the parts out of these without taking the time to read all of them. But I want you to look at verse 21 in Ephesians chapter 5. Because where we usually go is jump down to verse 22 that says, "Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as unto the Lord." In verse 25, 24, 25, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church." But I want you to go back and look at verse 21. Paul is not doing anything here to diminish the role of the husband being the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. But Paul said what we don't say in verse 21 when he said submission is mutual. Husbands, submit yourselves unto your wives. This past September, when I performed the ceremony for Carter and Allison, at a very emotional moment, I looked at Carter and I said, "Son, you've got to submit to her." Because Paul said that. Now again, I'm not diminishing the role of the husband as the head of the wife and the wife being in submission to him in that role. But Paul said we got to submit to one another. And we'll talk more about that. Look at these verses. This is the picture of the godly family. First, from Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 4. "A wife of noble character is her husband's crown. A disgraceful wife is like a decay in his bones." From the virtuous woman chapter, Proverbs 31 and verse 10. "A wife of noble character who can find? She is worth far more than rubies." Her husband, verse 23, he's respected at the city gate where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. Verse 28, this virtuous woman, the children of the godly family, the virtuous woman and her husband, they rise up and call her blessed. They praise her. Psalm 128, verses 1 to 4. "Blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in his ways. You will eat the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity will be yours. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house. Your sons will be like olive shoots around your table. Thus is the man blessed who fears the Lord." Those families who are close and close to God just works better. Just works better. And to prove my point, I want you to look closely at what happens when we do it God's way versus what happens when we do it Satan's way. God hates divorce. Satan loves divorce, from Malachi 2 and verse 16, and from Matthew 19, verse 8. And I want you to think with me just for a moment about the hurt of divorce. I've seen it many times, been in court testifying. Why? Because Satan has his way. God's plan for marriage versus Satan's plan. God's plan calls for me to focus on Tina's needs, not my own. Whereas Satan's plan says, you just think about yourself. Get what you can get. Focus on you. And in Matthew 7, verse 12, the golden rule teaches us that's not the way our natures are to be. And I'll use this verse again in Acts 20 and verse 35 to remind us of Luke quoting Jesus when he said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." And I'll say it this way. We sleep better at night when we do for others than when we are busy during the day trying to figure out how others can do for us. The same is true in marriage. It is the case that those who are looking to satisfy themselves are not happy because they're never fulfilled. God's plan for marriage versus Satan's plan. God's plan brings about fulfilled relationships. Where Satan's plan brings about relationships that are never good enough. I don't care how beautiful they are. I don't care how good looking they are. After a while, there's somebody better. I don't care how hard working they are, how much money their family has or they bring in. If we're doing it all about us and doing it Satan's way, it never is good enough. But those godly, beautiful, older couples who grow closer and closer and closer to God and each other, they got it figured out. God's plan versus Satan's plan. God's plan is inward beauty. Satan's plan is outward beauty. God's plan versus Satan's plan. God's plan provides openness and transparency. When we're living, following the devil and giving in to his temptations, we have to hide things. We have to be dishonest. We tell some things in partial truths. This verse that doesn't necessarily directly apply to marriage, I think does apply. The idea of being transparent, being able to confess our faults one to another, and so many bad marriages have so much hiding. And if you don't have trust in your marriage because there's been a breach of trust, it's the hardest thing in the world except for life itself. Once it's gone, to get back. So what are challenges to putting God first? What makes it difficult for us to have God in the center of our marriage as we ought? First challenge is when one spouse is significantly stronger spiritually than the other. Challenge number 2, when we become so busy that our faith becomes just a matter of lifestyle. When we get out of the habit of praying together. When we live lives of double standards. When family demands come along and scream more loudly than spiritual things. When we find ourselves falling in the rut of just going through the motions. When our spiritual lives become stagnant. So real quickly, some suggestions for putting God in the center of our marriage. Number 1 is time every day, just focusing on spiritual things. I'm not talking about taking an hour every night to have a long devotional. It can be 2 or 3 minutes, and I can give these to you later. These are some examples. Just good devotional books. Have small paragraphs, maybe a verse associated with them. It may take 2 minutes to read and pray together. What does it do? It causes both of us at the end or the beginning or whenever in the day to stop and walk together to the throne of God. To emphasize spiritual things. Quiet times for couples, H. Norman Wright. Moments Together for Couples by Dennis and Barbara Rainey. Our Love is Here to Stay by Tony and Lois Evans. These are so good, and they're easy and they're quick, but they maintain and help us to maintain a focus. Time every day in spiritual things. Praying together. I want to tell you something. Too many couples say we want God to be in the center of our marriage, but it's too awkward for us to pray together. And you can choose to do this how you want to. Some couples are fine with her praying out loud with him, some are not. You decide. But don't fail to pray together because it's too awkward. Don't do that. And you can get over the awkwardness of it. I've seen it over and over again. Prayer of this type can be informal. Doesn't have to involve verbiage as though we were standing in this pulpit. Tina and I will talk sometimes before we pray, sometimes while we're praying, about who we need to pray for. Sometimes we'll interrupt one another because somebody else will come to mind or some situation. Why? Because we're talking to God in a very meaningful way. I can't tell you how meaningful that type of prayer life has been in us building our spiritual lives together. Suggestion number 3, ask each other, how are you doing spiritually? Have you ever asked your spouse, where are you? How are you doing? Are you having a hard time spiritually? Where's your faith? I realize that depending on where we are spiritually, some of us are going, you got to be kidding me. I could never do that. I could not have that conversation. I'm not there yet. I understand. Move in that direction. Spiritual discussion. It's a very meaningful thing. It's a very easy thing for Tina to do. to take her daily emails that have that daily Bible verse that go out to everybody at Columbia Academy and just forward those on to her son and daughter and son-in-law and daughter-in-law and her husband. I love getting those. I don't always read them. Sometimes I see them in passing. But you know what? It tells me that my wife cares about what God has to say. And it tells her children that, our children that, and our children-in-law that. Emphasizing spiritual things. Number 4, find things that help us keep the importance of marriage in place. I appreciate so much you all having Family Emphasis Day. Elders, you need to do something every year to bring everybody's focus back. Why? Because it's easy for us to become distracted. And we can do this in marriages ourselves. We need to hold each other accountable. We need to ask how you're doing. And what I would say is, wherever you are today in your relationship with God, move toward Him. If it's too awkward to pray together, if it's too awkward to talk about it, move in that direction. Because if we reach out to God, God will reach out to us. And I got to fly through these, I know, but I'll do my best. Number 2, the abnormal marriage has honesty, openness, trust, and transparency. Scriptures that apply. Hebrews 13 verse 4, marriage is an honorable institution. We dishonor it when we are dishonest. 1 John 1 verse 9, we need to be open enough to confess our weakness. Tina knows what my weaknesses are. I'm able, because our relationship has grown to the point, I'm able to talk to her about what tempts me the most, what I wrestle with. She knows what those things are. And I know what those are for her. Wasn't that way always. But we've worked to that point. That's what God wants. He wants us to be that honest with ourselves and with one another. A big part of this is guarding and protecting our words. Matthew 5:37, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Mean what you say and say what you mean. Now, I always get some people looking at each other when I say this, but are we the type that say I'll be there at 7:30 and that means 7:40? Now everybody's straight-necked. They're not going to look now, right? What happens when we say things and don't mean them so clearly? Truly, trust should be easier for the Christian marriage. It's why we put God first. It's why we make sure that when we say something, we're 100% accurate and honest. Why? Because marriages where she will say to him or he will say to her, I spent this much money, or I'll be there at this time, or this will happen, where the other spouse hears that and reinterprets because he knows $20 meant 24, or 7:30 meant 7:40. When we become so flippant in what we say that our yes is not completely yes and our no is not completely no, there's an added burden there. There are communication issues. Why? Because there's a lot of guessing going on. We need to take that out of the equation. And oh, how big and what a big part financial trust and openness and honesty is. Sometimes it's just extremely difficult, especially when one understands business type issues and one does not. Makes it awfully easy for one to pay the bills and know exactly how much money is there and knows when we can spend money on that new gun or that new tool or that new whatever and when we can't. You know, and 3 weeks ago, he spends money on something because he pays the bills, and then something unexpected comes up and it becomes tight and he gets it paid, but then she wants the dress and she comes up and says, I saw this dress I'd love to have, and he says, I can't do that. We can't do that. Money's too tight. What's she thinking about? The money that was spent on the gun or the tool or the golf round or whatever. Why? Because there's not on the same page. Now, I understand what it's like for one to pay the bills and to be in control of finances. I also understand how difficult it is for the two of them, after one has done that, to sit down and say, all right, this is what I did. We paid this much this month. We've got this much money in the bank. This is where we are. Why? It helps take care of that lack of understanding of two people. It helps both of them to be on the same page. It's a part of trust, transparency, and openness. Create rules if needed, just so we both will be on the same page. And oh, how husbands and wives' lives need to be open books to each other. Almost never should there be anything that we keep. And when there's a lack of trust, or when some trust issue has taken place, at that point especially, it's so very important for us to be willing to open our lives to whatever in an effort to rebuild that trust. Simply being willing to do it speeds up the process. Don't keep secrets. Even to the point that sometimes when people come to me and say, I'll tell you something, but don't tell anybody, depending on what it is, sometimes I'll say, I don't keep secrets from Tina. We pray about things together. If you tell me, you need to be willing to tell her also. Now, there are counseling situations that are confidential, and I don't go running to her with those. But it's just not a good thing when husbands and wives are purposefully and strategically keeping things from one another. And part of openness and trust and transparency involves technology. I used to think internet pornography was Satan's strongest tool, and I'll tell you now, I think Facebook may have taken the place. Why? Because of so many relationships that happen because of people finding old friends, sometimes old boyfriends and girlfriends, on Facebook. I could tell you story after story after story. Be careful with it. If you find yourself posting something or going somewhere where when your spouse comes in the room, you hope they don't see it, it's a sign. Be careful with it. Trust truly is a great blessing. Once it's gone, it is so hard to get back. And the last one, abnormal marriage consists of two people who truly are best friends. Genesis 2 and verse 18, I will make for him a helpmeet, a helper. I will create someone that he will enjoy companionship with. And that Hebrew word ezer suggests that very thing. Tina and I allowed life to pull us apart. And several years ago, I went to her and I said, what do we do just for us that we enjoy doing anymore? Between Freed Hardeman and preaching on Sundays and going to school and working, trying to keep her at home with the kids, which was very important to us, well, we were just stretched. And for several years, we got to the point where we were so stretched, we didn't have time for us. And I asked her, what do we do just for us? And she thought about it, and she finally said, I don't know unless it's yard work. Well, we've got a farm. We had a farm in Henderson. I love my farm. You know many farmers that have really nice yards? You don't have time for that. What she meant was she cut the grass, and she loves to cut the grass, and I love for her to cut the grass. We took a legal pad and sat down and said, what can we come up with just for us? First thing I wrote down was a motorcycle. And you know what she said? You're using this to get you a bike, aren't you? I said, no, I'm not. And we bought that old Gold Wing from Marietta, Georgia, and put 10,000 miles on it really quick. And then we eventually traded it and got a new Gold Wing that we still have that we've ridden over 60,000 miles on. We know that it's dangerous. We probably don't recognize the reality of that enough, but I want to tell you, we've had a lot of fun on that bike. A lot of fun. We take long trips, and we enjoy it. Why? Because it's just us. And we talk about it. We look forward to things to do. And after giving these lessons, husbands always come up to me and say, thank you, I needed that. I'm not trying to promote motorcycles. Some people are not comfortable with them. But if you don't have anything that you do together, if you don't have any mutual hobbies, if you don't have something that you look forward to doing together, you need to find it. And let me go ahead and give a caveat. Mothers, I know that there are a lot of you sitting here right now that go, I don't have time for a hobby. I've heard that more often than you would imagine. What I'm here to tell you is if you don't have a common interest with your spouse, you don't have time not to do that. And I realize it's easier said than done. We'll talk about that more tonight. Challenges for spouses attempting to be best friends. Children, they take everything we've got. We've got nothing left for each other if we're not careful and don't protect it. Careers, taking our relationship for granted until they're gone. Developing different hobbies and interests. Being on different spiritual levels. So we'll end with this. Suggestions to help spouses be best friends. Takes effort. Doesn't just happen. Remember how hard we worked when we were trying to impress them? You remember how hard we worked? How willing we were to do the extras? Number 2, be interested in what they're interested in. If it's important to someone who is so special to me, it should matter to me. And I always tell this. My wife, who grew up in the city of Memphis, will help me stretch fence, will help me work cows and calves, will rake hay because she loves it, because she loves me. And so when she does that and she says, would you mind going to this store with me? Is it that I can say, I don't like that store, I'm not going in there. I hate shopping. It's hard for me to deny that. Why? Because if it's important to her, it's important to me. If it's important to me, it's important to her. Find common interest. Take some time for each other every day. Be transparent. Best friends can be themselves around one another. Take time and effort to talk without the television. I'll tell this real quick. Had a couple that came to me, they were on the brink of divorce. They were that close. Both of them said that. So we start working on needs lists that we'll talk about tonight. And finally, I asked her, what do you need from him? What 3 to 5 things do you need? And she said, I only need one thing. And I said, what is it? And I thought, oh, this is going to be big. She said, I just need him to look at me when I talk to him. And I said, is that all? And he said, is that all? She said, yeah, I just need him to look at me. He teaches school, comes home, turns on ESPN. He's tired of the kids, tired of listening. And he hears her, but not in a convincing way. I'm telling you, they're doing great. He said, I didn't realize that was that big a deal. We worked on some other things. She just wanted communication. Those special marriages that are beyond the norm don't come without effort, but they are worth it. Well, those are 3, and I'm sorry for taking too long. I'm trying to cram too much in, but we'll work on 4 more tonight, and I'll try to do it quickly too. Work on it. God gave us a blessing, but with blessings come responsibility. May be that today you just need the prayers of the church for your marriage or for other situations. It may be that the way you need today to build your marriage in the way it is a fulfilling marriage is to put on Christ in baptism by hearing the Word of God, believing Jesus to be the Son of God, confessing that, repent of your sins, being baptized for the remission of sins. If you need to come today for any reason, we'd encourage you to do so while we stand and sing.